This journey through the score will focus on the overture to Richard Wagner's opera, The Meistersingers of Nuremberg. It's probably the most often performed piece of Wagner in the concert hall, very popular with audiences, and very approachable for youth and amateur orchestras. So it's an excellent piece for young conductors to study, because there's a very good chance of having the opportunity to rehearse and perform it. It's an excellent way into Wagner's style in general, and the piece also teaches us many valuable lessons about rehearsal technique in general. Much of what we will discuss comes directly from Sir Mark Elder and a talk he gave to the RNCM conducting class in May 2020. As well as being music director of the Halley Orchestra in Manchester since 2000, Sir Mark has had a career in opera at the very highest level and is one of the world's leading Wagnerians. He was chief conductor at English National Opera for 14 years, conducts regularly at the Met, Covent Garden, Paris, Chicago and many others, and in fact conducted this very opera at Bayreuth. Of course, it's always important to have a bit of background about the music you're working on, especially with a theatrical work. So a quick look at the synopsis will tell you that the opera is about a group of amateur poets and musicians who were primarily master craftsmen in various trades. They had developed a craftsman-like approach to music making, with lots of rules about composing and performing. The music we hear at the opening of the overture is their theme, and because of that, it's in 4/4. Sir Mark describes it as like a picture frame. It has 4 sides, so everybody knows where they are. This is in contrast to the music that the interloper Walter sings later in an attempt to win the Meistersingers contest. It's considered dangerous and inflammatory because it's in 3/4. So this opening is full of civic pride and respect for the Meistersingers traditions, but it mustn't sound pompous. The tempo marking in the beginning could be translated as very moderately moving, perhaps allegro moderato in Italian. Understand the markings in the first bar. Sehr gehalten, very held and sustained for the winds, and sehr kräftig, very powerful for the strings, with attack but not detached. Note that the melody is in oboe, clarinet and first trumpet, not the trombones. It's important to balance this correctly, possibly taking the trombones down to mezzo forte. Also in bar 1, take care that the cello, double basses, bass trombone and tuba aren't late. A good idea is to add a small accent to their second note to emphasize the dissonance of their B in C major. As so often with Wagner, it's important not to beat too big or the sound and balance will suffer. At bar 9, the grace notes in the timpani should be heard, so not too crushed. Note the marking immer forte at bar 8, then rinforzando, meaning louder, at 12, and then fortissimo at 14, but not for the brass, who remain forte. In Wagner, forte in the brass is nowhere near as loud as in, say, Shostakovich or Stravinsky. The sound should be mellow and blend well with the strings and woodwind. Wagner had very flamboyant handwriting and took great care over notating trills in a very florid way. His music is full of trills, but particularly this opera. They must always be played melodically, brought out of the texture, and the turn at the end of the trill given enough space to be heard. We know that Wagner didn't expect unflinching tempi, and he regarded controlling rubato as fundamental to the conductor's role. As an example, a little time can be taken in the bar before A, to highlight the trill, to bring the music to its first real cadence, and to establish the character of the new section. The woodwind lines here should be sung expressively and perhaps phrased from the weaker notes, in other words leaning on the first, third and fifth notes in the flute melody here. The strings are very much an accompaniment, and the exact nature of their meno forte marking will depend on their number and the acoustic of the hall. These 10 bars get gradually softer, più piano, diminuendo, and finally pianissimo to create a magical moment by the time of the poco rallentando in bar 36. The a tempo can be hard for the ensemble to be together. It should not be too hectic, as this is leading to the procession of the Meistersingers. There's a discrepancy between flutes and violins in bar 38, the flutes having a tie that the violins don't have. Elder thinks this is deliberate, as it's clear in the manuscript. Regardless, the violins should play off the string and with brilliance. The melody at letter B perhaps has the character of a hymn tune rather than a march. Again, only 40 in the brass, and the energy should be in the upbeat, not the downbeat. Note how the melody passes back and forward from first trumpet to third. Adjust their dynamics to make this clear. The harp is important here. It takes on the role of a lute or a guitar as an accompaniment to singing. So spread the chords from before the beat to help with this character so that the top note falls on the beat. The string scales in bars 42, 44 and 45 should be played melodically and in the correct rhythm. In 46 and 48, make sure the trill in the upper strings can be heard. You'll hear it because they're right beside you, but that doesn't mean the audience will. Letter C can be in 2 or 4, it's a matter of choice. Elder spoke of how he has changed his opinion on this over the years, and now beats a small, calm 4, hardly conducting, just showing the lines. He described the difference in this way. If in 2, you're conducting the expansiveness of the musical ideas, if in 4, you're showing the inner hemoglobin of the music. Note also that the bassoons and tuba play slurred, but the double basses don't. The basses should think of the line and play very cantabile. In bar 67, the woodwind take over the melody with first trumpet. Balance this so that the trumpet is not too dominant. Cue the timpani and harp at bar 76 and see if you can hear the harp at all. At bar 80, the trombones have sempre forte, not the sempre fortissimo of everybody else. 2 before D conducts something like piano, or the trumpets and trombones will destroy everything. The marking at D means with movement, but always still somewhat broad. It's an 8-bar bridge passage to the key change at letter E. Give the violins some space on the last beat of the bar so that we hear the little notes, and be sure the second violins are heard, especially their accented C flat in bar 92. Give the clarinet time in the bar before E. If you go beneath the next tempo, it's often easier to find what the next tempo is, and have a little look to the double basses for their pizzicato on the third beat. It can be hard to decide the correct tempo at E. This melody eventually becomes the final song of the whole opera, which Walter sings to win the prize. Here it's more tender, cantabile and warm in character. In the main tempo, but moderately would be a translation, so it certainly sits below the tempo of the opening, but must still flow. Encourage the fourth horn, who is a little solo. Enjoy the lovely bassoon line and the orchestration of the strings. No second violins initially, which allows the violas to come through. Make sure the semiquavers are played melodically, and observe the general rule in Wagner that a piano after a crescendo is almost always subito. At bar 105, the first violins are asked to play more passionately, so get a move on, but then give them space for the demi-semiquavers, that's the 30-second notes, at the end of the next bar. There's more to being passionate than being fast, after all. In the bar before F, there's a discrepancy between the flute and oboe articulation. Elder says the manuscript is ambiguous, so he asks the flute to play legato, as the oboe does. In bar 111, the last note in the second violins should be D natural, not D sharp as printed in many scores and parts. Then enjoy the slightly obsessive trill fest in the next few bars. More misprints here. In bar 116 in the violas, the trill instruction on the second beat is sometimes missing in the parts. In 117, in the cello part, beat 3, the last note of the triplet should be a C natural, not a D natural. Hearing a wrong note due to a mistake in the parts that you already know exists is an old and established trick of the trade. At bar 120, it's always hard to hear the syncopation in the woodwinds. It's important because later on the violins do the same thing just before H, and their bow changes make it very clear. There's 2 small adjustments to fix that. One is to add accents, and the second is to double the line in the second oboe and the second clarinet. Take some time into G so that the contrasting rhythm between the woodwinds and the violins is clear. Letter G is the Meistersingers theme at double speed and depicts them as young boys. Therefore the characters should be immature and naive. Check the double basses are awake at bar 133 for their high F pizzicato, and it's absolutely correct that the woodwinds and horns are subito piano on the bar line. The cello line at 138 is satirical. Beckmesser is being mocked because he didn't win the competition, so there's a tinge of unpleasantness in the character. At H, the bass trombone should play melodically, and there's another potential misprint in the parts. In the first violins, sometimes they don't change to a G on the second beat of the bar. They should do that as in the score. In the next bar, the trombones tend to get behind. Balance at letter I can be tricky. The triplet upbeat needs to be played a little louder than marked, but then everyone who is piano should keep well under the mezzo forte theme and bassoons, tuba and double basses. They should play very marked as instructed, but always melodically and therefore not detached. At K, the melody, now with cello added, changes character. It's less marked, certainly, not too legato as it says, but steady and held. At letter L, you've probably guessed by now, not too loud in the brass melody, and try to make the rhythm in second violins and viola accurate. It's not as fast as they might think. Letter M is difficult to balance, and is another spot where it's very likely the conductor will not hear the truth. Some time can be taken into letter N, but then don't be too slow. It's important to hear the triplets in the third trumpet at 2-1-4, and highlight the difference between the first violins and violas playing on the string and the second violins off. 6 bars before the end, highlight the conversation between the 2 violin parts. The highest notes in each part should ring out. For concert performances, Mark Elder adds an extra bar to make it the same as the very end of the opera. Essentially, this means inserting an additional bar between the last 2. You can hear his recording with the Halle Orchestra on Spotify.